Right, guys. Well, I just went live, as you saw. Nobody joined just yet, so I'll give that a second. All right, seems somebody just joined, and let's see. Oh, there you go. A couple of people coming in. So, guys, what I want to do today is basically talk about any topic at all that is 3D related. Okay, so anything at all, whether it's jobs, whether it's universities, whether it's how to make money, projects you're working on, software, whatever, right? So, get some questions coming in and we'll get started. So, hi, guys. I'm just going to take a sip of coffee here, if you guys don't mind. So just so that you guys are warned, I had a couple of issues with the live stream here on YouTube. Every time I do this, after about half an hour or so, the audio shuts down for whatever reason. And if that happens again, I will typically sign off and reboot, okay? Okay, guys, so any questions from your end? Let me know. Hi, Mr. Time Machine, and Aman, and Plush. I can't pronounce that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm doing my best. So let me know. What are you guys working on right now? Hey, Carolina. I think that's you anyway. Yeah, that's you. Hi there. Okay, so Aman is asking me what models he should include in an environmental demo reel. Well, that kind of depends on what type of environments you are creating and for what type of product. So are you creating environments for feature film, for short movies, for games, for it kind of depends on what you're creating it for. And then what you typically want to do is show your pipeline. So if you do concept art yourself, or let's say sketching, I would include a sketch. I would include some concept art. Then I would put in the rough block out of the environment. Then I would put in several render layers. So like an ambient occlusion pass, a beauty pass, and whatnot. And then finally, the complete thing. That way they get a good understanding of, what your workflow is, where your technique is, and, what that looks like, right? So depending on, like I said, what type of product you're working for, right? So let's see, what else? Really important question from Subhajit. Hopefully I pronounced that all right. Really important question. What keeps you to stay motivated to work, especially in this field, when you get bored, when you procrastinate? Well, the thing is, I don't believe there's any job out there ever where people never get bored. But the thing with 3D art is it is such a huge area to work in. So there are many things you can do. And if you get fed up with modeling at some point, you can work on lighting, or you can work on concept art, or you can work on anything else. For me, it's more because I want to do something where I can tell a story. And some people do that by writing or drawing or painting. I like to use 3D for that, but also photography. So whenever you get bored, consider that it's a job, but there are jobs out there that are a lot more boring, trust me, right? Okay, so Aman, you're saying yes for gaming. Well, I guess I basically covered your question there, hopefully anyway. And let's see, I'm getting a question whether 3D lighting artists should draw. Well, I did a recent video on that, and not specifically on lighting, but the things that I believe you should do when you become a 3D artist. For lighting artists, that is slightly different because lighting is a specialty. And when you get into lighting, it's very important to study classic paintings. So Rembrandt and Van Gogh, and study the techniques of light, because light they have multiple purposes in a scene. One is obviously to create light, but more importantly, it is to direct the viewer to a certain area. So if you pay attention to that, you will see that many times a shot, even photographs, but also paintings, the light in a painting will force you to look into a certain area, and people do that on purpose. So study classic paintings, study classic art, and it certainly helps to understand drawing techniques. You don't actually have to be able to paint, but you need to understand the theory, right? Does that answer your question? So Time Machine is saying, do you know me? Well, I know your nickname. I don't know what you mean by do I know you? Do I know you personally? I know who you are. Yes, I do. So let's see. Parth is asking me, what would be better, a university or an art college for an undergraduate degree in game art and design? Well, once again, that depends very much on what you want to do. One question that I get all the time is, so what matters most, education or skill? Well, the thing is, if you don't have any skill, it doesn't matter what you do, whether you have a university or not, right? At the end of the day, studios are interested in your output. So what can you create? If you have skill and a university degree or a college degree, that's great. Now, typically, universities tend to focus more on technical aspects next to creative aspects, where art college is more towards the creative side, I would say. So it kind of depends on what your possibilities are to go to. So if you can afford it, check it out. So let's see what else. So Huging Hillman is saying, thank you, Mike, for all your tutorials. Helped me a lot. Okay, you're very welcome. And let's see, what else you got, guys? Good questions so far. All views are, you mean all the views on this chat? Well, I assume for most part, people in the US are sleeping right now because it's the middle of the night. Let's see, an idea how motion capture works. And can we use mocap without using Connect, using a normal DSLR? Well, the way how mocap, or for those of you who don't know the phrase mocap, motion capture, is that basically a person puts certain markers on its body. So let's say one on the nose, one above the eyes, one at the elbows, the wrists, the hands, and so forth. And these are then calculated back to positions in a 3D space. Like, for example, the position of a vertex in Maya. That's how you can then create a 3D character and have that character move exactly as how the character moved before, because you have that motion capture. That's how that works, right? And even if you capture that footage with a regular DSLR with those markers, you would still be able, if you got the right software, to connect that motion to a character. So let's see, I'm getting a question, do we still expect a floatable toy for tomorrow's time lapse? Well, I got that on my list, but actually I just posted a little sneak peek into my Facebook group. What we're going to be doing tomorrow in the time lapse is an ice cart. So an ice cream cart, right? So Coca Surfboards is saying, do you know how to fix texture bugs when importing an FBX file to Maya? Texture bugs like what? Like dark areas, black areas, distortions, artifacts? What kind of problems are you having? So getting a question from Mr. Time Machine, why don't I do character modeling? Well, actually, I do character modeling. I just don't do character modeling in videos. For the simple reason that I decided at some point that characters are, for the most part, bipeds, and bipeds are bipeds. They got 2 arms and 2 legs. You can get really into anatomy, and the problem with that is that will make every video I make, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, or whatnot, and people simply don't look at those videos. So that's why I don't do that. Well, Black Man is saying, can I do a video how to rig a mouth? Well, what I was just saying, I don't do characters in tutorials. But that said, if you want to rig a mouth, I did a video on how to use blend shapes. That is how typically a rig is done for the face of a character. So a blend shape is basically where you got model A, let's say a closed mouth, model B, let's say an open mouth. And then by using blend shapes, you can slowly transition from the open to closed, or the raised to lowered, and so forth. And that is how that is typically done. So if you want to look up some tutorials on that on YouTube, try looking for facial rigs using blend shapes, right? So let's see what else. Okay, so when is the next season for the competition modeling? Well, that's going to be a really special one. I have done over the years, and I started in 2013, I've done many modeling challenges. Upcoming September 1st, and this is going to be the first time ever, I'm going to do one modeling challenge for professionals only, right? Now, what does that mean? It means that you need to prove to the professional jury that you have worked as a professional, that you worked on a project, that you worked for a studio, that you have been part of a collaboration, and so forth. And we're going to do that probably one time only. It's going to get huge exposure. There's corporate backing. The results are going to be shown to, I would say, at least 1 million people. Okay, so that's going to be announced on my channel on September 1st. Okay, so Coca Surfboard is coming back on my question about the texture. I'm talking about like a t-shirt isn't fitting correctly, eyes are showing even inside the face, but the texture is showing correctly. Okay, so it looks like you're talking about texture positioning, and that is all related to proper UVing. If your model is UV'd properly and your texture is applied and there's no stretching going on, your texture should be fine. So I would definitely check out your UV on that. Okay, so Parther's saying, what are the best specs for a PC for Unreal? The thing is, nowadays, if you buy a new PC, basically every new PC would be capable of, supporting that, maybe with the exception of Chromebooks. But anything that has an Intel i5 CPU with a minimum of 8 GB would be okay. But okay is not what you're asking, probably. I would say anything above that is good to have, right? So if you can afford 16 gig, great, 32, 64, 128, you can go as crazy as you want on that. But at a bare minimum, I would say absolute minimum of 8 GB RAM, a dedicated video card, and at least a multi-core i5 CPU. Let's see, what's the scope of Dreamboat? Okay, guys, I think I just, oh, there you go. I thought I lost you guys. So let's see, I just saw a question here. What's the scope of animator in Canada? What do you mean by scope of animator? You mean the possibilities to become an animator in Canada? Well, if that is your question, keep in mind that Canada nowadays, and especially Montreal, is an extremely important area right now for people that are in the 3D field. I would say from a global point of view, California would be 1, Montreal would be 2, Munich in Germany would be 3, and Madrid in Spain would be 4. And these are very important hubs for the 3D industry right now. So I'm getting a question here. Let's see. Have I ever used the AMD Radeon renderer from Maya? I have. I actually did a video on a Radeon card that I had, and I used their software. But I have stopped doing so since, and I went back to using my NVIDIA cards, and I typically render outside of Maya. So let's say in Keyshot and Substance Painter, sometimes RenderMan, but not necessarily Arnold. I'm not too fond of that. Okay, Ganesh is asking me to make videos on mental ray. Well, the thing is, I did many videos on mental ray, but Maya stepped away from mental ray, and the product is or was created by NVIDIA, and NVIDIA stopped creating mental ray. So there's really no point in making tutorials on that because the product no longer exists. Now, I did many videos on that in the past, so these are still useful, hopefully. So I saw a question, something about, is it possible to create a render farm? Of course it is. But keep in mind, you're talking about a huge investment. And I used to have a render farm as one of my sponsors. They have 3,000 servers. There's a lot of competition out there. There are companies in China that have 8,000 servers. So if you want to compete with them, you're talking about investing millions and millions and millions. Okay, so Hopeplay is saying, what happens when the UVs are not placed in the 0 to 1 space? That's kind of a technical question, because normally, and that's what I talk about in all my videos, if your texture is not in the 0 to 1 space, it won't show up on your model, because that is where your model shells are. But technically, it is possible to use more than one 0 to 1 space. So you could have the 0 to -1 space. You could have basically all 4 quadrants. Very few people do that, but it is possible. Let's see. So Blackman is asking if I have an ArtStation portfolio. Yes, just check out MH tutorials. But keep in mind, I spend, I would say, 90% of my time on YouTube. So I don't have a lot up there. And what I have up there is usually old work. Super Cool is asking when this stream ends. Will it be in my channel? Yes, it will. Let's see. Games have multiple UVs in a single model. Yes, well, most models have. I mean, almost every model I make has multiple UVs. The reason for that is people seem to think that you need to put everything, your entire model, into one 0 to 1 space, which will, first of all, make it a bit crowded and have an impact on your texture, because your texture density then has to go quite high. So why not just use multiple? I mean, that's much easier and you got much more control. So Coca Surfboard is saying, in general, the cut scenes are made in Maya or inside the engines. I assume you mean cutting the UV shells. That's what I think you mean. If that's the case, I typically do that inside Maya. So Mike is saying, is it better to be a master at one program and have no real knowledge of other programs, or to be more jack of all trades? Well, that's a very good question. Now, the thing is, if you want to make money in this industry, you basically have to be a generalist. So you need to be able to do more than one thing, because you're probably working as an independent, right? And if you're working as an independent artist, it's very unlikely that people will come out and ask you to do a lighting project for them. So if you're a generalist, you will do all sorts of things, from a 3D logo for a website to whatever, right? If you at some point, however, get hired by a studio and they are looking for a specialist, let's say a lighting specialist, then you could dedicate yourself to that. Knowing just one package of software, let's say, for example, Maya, I think will very much hurt your chances of getting hired at all, to be honest. Let's see. This one. Wow. So Chris is saying, if you were to write a list of fundamentals to learn in a linear order for a beginner learning 3D modeling and animation, what would that be? I'm enrolling into honors and C animation next September. Okay. Well, I'm probably going to start somewhere where you don't expect that. I would start by understanding drawing skills, right? And I did a video on this recently. So how does perspective work? And I'm talking about traditional 2D drawing, so pen to paper, right? You don't have to be good at drawing at all. You need to understand the theory. You need to understand skill, a ratio, proportion. You need to understand how shading works and so forth. Then when you have that, try and get some skill in concept work. So you're able to do, let's say, a sketch. If you got an idea for a model, you can at least create some sort of visualization on a piece of paper, right? And if you want to go even further than that, try to develop a little bit of concept skills for concept art, okay? Now, when you are able to do that, you start with box modeling. So hard surface modeling, for example, in Maya, but you can do that in 3ds Max or somewhere else. So not NURBS modeling, polygonal hard surface modeling. And when you are able to basically model something, you know, not too complex, but straightforward, like a table or something like that, then of course it's very, very important to be able to UV properly. Now, when you know how to model, so box model and UV, then it's time to start on texturing. When you control texturing, you are basically able to create a complete textured model. Then you need to dedicate yourself to something that will allow you to do PBR texturing. So let's say Substance Painter or other programs that do that, which will allow you to bake multiple maps besides a diffuse or color map. So an ambient occlusion pass, a normal map, and so on. And then when you got all that done, basically you are ready to create a game-ready model, right? Low poly, high poly, baking maps. Then you can start to extend your knowledge by looking at lighting techniques, by looking at environmental modeling, so other areas of modeling in general, okay? And then, of course, if you know all that and you're okay with that and you want to get into animation, then, of course, if you got the modeling down, learn how to rig, learn how to animate. Does a rigger need to know how to model? No. Does a modeler need to know how to rig? No. However, if you can model, rig, and animate, you are more likely to get hired by, for example, a smaller studio. I hope that makes sense, right? Black Man is saying how to learn Maya perfectly like you. Well, trust me, I don't know Maya perfectly. I'm okay in Maya. There are always people out there that know things better. And, you know, I learn every day. And hopefully you guys do too. And that's just part of the fun, I guess, right? Okay, so Carolina is saying, for product design, what would you recommend other than Maya? Well, let me just ask you a question there. Product design for what? The reason why I'm asking that is product design is typically when you want to have a visualization of a product that is not existing yet. So you want to have something tangible, or at least something you can flip around on a screen to look at. And when it comes to modeling that, you can do that, for example, in Maya or any other 3D package. When it comes to presentation, as in almost photorealistic presentation of a product for product design purposes, many people turn to Keyshot. Keyshot is easy because you typically don't have to UV your model, which speeds up your workflow a lot, and you have a lot of control over lighting and a lot of control over materials. So the question about the 3D modeling basic salary, that depends on where you live to start with. I mean, to give you an idea, somebody that, let's say, is working in, can come up with a, let's say you're working in Bosnia, right? If you're working in Bosnia, your wages may be something like $800 a month, right? And I'm just guessing here, $800 a month. If you're living in California, it's probably closer to $4,500 a month. Now, the thing there is that although you make a lot more money in California, everything is way, way, way more expensive as well. So where's the real difference, right? So what I tend to do is tell people it's all about how much money do you need to make a month to live and to pay all your bills. So to upgrade your hardware once in a while, to pay for your software, to pay for your education and whatnot. Now, if you know what that number is, regardless of where you live, you know what that number is. This will tell you, okay, I need to make this much money per day, right? Okay, that will tell you how much money you need to make per hour. Now, the thing is, you're not going to be working 10 hours a day every day. You're going to be looking for clients. You're going to be talking to clients. A lot of time, you're not going to be making any money. So if you're making money 40% of your time of the entire month, then you know you have to double that amount, right? So that is basically your safety number that you have to go for per hour. And when you get hired to do a project, you need to calculate, okay, how long will this take me? How much do I need to make? And that will be your number. Does that make sense? Let's see, what else? The relationship between Maya and After Effects. Well, After Effects is a post-composition platform. So After Effects is used a lot by people that edit videos, and you can add all sorts of effects in After Effects. Now, the reason why there's a relation is nowadays you can bring in 3D objects in After Effects as well. But After Effects is really adding effects after the fact. That's why it's called After Effects, okay? So Dreamboat is saying, why is Blender not used in professional situations? Well, to be honest, it is used in professional situations, but not as much as Maya and other platforms. The reason for that is that Blender is open source. It's completely free. And for that reason, they got less resources to develop it compared to, for example, Maya. If you're paying hundreds of dollars a month to have Maya as a professional, or you're paying nothing for Blender, that's obviously a big, big, big difference. So Blackman is saying, why is ZBrush very difficult to use? Well, first of all, I can agree with you on that. ZBrush is a horrible, horrible, horrible thing to learn. However, it is such an amazing product. Now, the reason why is because ZBrush was never intended to be used by 3D artists. ZBrush was originally designed to be used by real-world sculptors. So people that would go out and take a big block of marble and start to make a statue. The reason why ZBrush was created was so that they could get a visualization of, what that would look like before they actually invest in that, expensive marble. When people in 3D started to use it, they had to kind of change that user interface, and that's why ZBrush is different from everything else. So Cake is saying jewelers are using ZBrush a lot for that reason. Yeah, I can imagine. And Keyshot as well. Keyshot is used a lot by jewelers, because if you, let's say, want to buy a diamond wedding ring or whatever, they're not going to go out and buy diamonds and start working on gold until you give the go-ahead for them to make the actual ring, right? And Keyshot is a very, very easy product for you to do that. So, yeah. So Nikolai is saying hello from Ukraine. Well, hello, Nikolai. Okay, let's see. What else do we got? Let's see. Black Eagle is saying Cinema 4D is widely used for commercial work too. That is completely correct. And I guess it's really, what's your preference? I mean, 3ds Max is used a lot by people who do interior work and architectural work, so buildings and building interiors. Maya was originally intended more towards animation, and Maya LT or Maya Lite was more intended towards games or gaming. problem there is that Maya LT is cheaper, but also a lot more limited when it comes to functionality. So when people work with Maya LT and they progress, they start to run into trouble. So Mohammed is saying, is After Effects useful for me after doing animation in Maya for doing things more realistic? Yes, of course. So let's say you created an animation in Maya of, I don't know, a guy hitting two pieces of metal onto each other, right? So what you can do is you can render out that complete animation, and then you can take it into After Effects, and then you can add a spark when the two pieces of metal hit, and you can add a puff of smoke, for example. You don't have to do that in Maya. You can do that in After Effects. So what else, guys? I'm kind of surprised that audio is still working. That's kind of neat. So because usually YouTube runs into trouble by now. Okay, Nikolai is saying, do I need to learn a programming language, and which one is good for a 3D artist? Yes and no. The thing is, programming code, or in this case, scripting in Maya, what is mostly used in Maya is Python or Mel scripting, and that is usually done to speed up workflow. So most modelers that I know don't really use it a lot, but if you are working for a larger group and you have a lot of repetitive things that need to be repeated all the time, what people will do is they'll write a script to do that for you. So it kind of depends on where you're working. So Chana is saying, I need a job based on Maya. Well, I think that basically applies to everybody on this chat right now. So join the club, I would say. Let's see, what's the difference between Arnold Render or Mental Ray? Well, first of all, what Maya tends to do and has done for a long time is they use third-party plugin software. So they will find a product, a renderer somewhere. They will incorporate it into Maya for a certain period of time, like Mental Ray, for example. And that is why Arnold is a third-party plugin, but so is Mental Ray. Now, what happened is NVIDIA stopped making Mental Ray, and either they stopped making it, and for that reason, Maya pushed it out of Maya, or it's the other way around. But anyway, they started using Arnold now. As far as renders are concerned, most renderers have their own materials. So Mental Ray has Mental Ray materials, Arnold has Arnold materials, and it's, for the most part, kind of similar. I mean, I work with RenderMan, with Turtle, with Redshift, with I think 7 or 8 different renderers, and they're almost all of them are similar. So Mohammed is saying, how can I know that I'm ready to go to do work in Maya in a professional way? Well, I'm going to give you an answer that you probably think that I'm kidding, but I'm really serious here. The way you know is when people pay you money to do it, right? What do I mean by that? If you are going to, let's say, a job interview with your Maya skills, based on the interview, you will know. There's no test that will tell you up front that you're going to be hired or not, right? What you can do is participate in modeling challenges. Make sure you're part of 3D artist forums, so you get feedback from other artists that will tell you your work is okay, or you need to pay attention to certain things. Based on that, you at some point get an idea how your work compares to that of others, right? But there's no test that will say, okay, starting Monday, now you're a professional, now you can go out and look for jobs. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, so Mike Evans is saying solid angle joined Autodesk, and that is probably one of the reasons why Arnold is a default installed renderer now. That is very likely the case. That could be true, yeah. So Dreamboat is saying, can we apply for a job without having a certificate? Of course. There are people that work for major studios that have no formal education at all, right? I mean, the whole thing about an education is it gives you proof that you put in the time and the effort to learn something, right? But the way to measure whether you have actually learned something or not is by looking at your final output. So if you can create something that is good or better than somebody else with a formal education, then you are basically on the same page there. You may be a bit behind because you have less knowledge of technical workflow pipeline and whatnot. But if your work is good, in my personal opinion, it's usually enough for them to hire you. So Chaos Sang is saying something that is, for me, something really close to home, because I have the same problem. He's saying, after being a professional animator, in his case, for a while, it's hard to increase the skill because there's no time and you don't know how to start. I completely agree. People don't seem to realize how much time it takes to upload 3 videos a week on YouTube. That is basically a full-time job. And because YouTube doesn't pay very well, I need to make money in between to make sure I can keep on doing this, right? So where am I going to learn new things? I get questions from people saying, can you do, I don't know, Houdini tutorials or whatever? Now, the thing is, first of all, I don't have all the software in the world. And second, if you want to learn new software to an extent that you can actually do tutorials about them, you need to invest a lot of time. So what my answer is to this question basically is, and I'm not kidding, I work 7 days a week. I basically start somewhere 4 or 5 in the morning, and I usually stop at something like 11 in the evening. And I work 6, 7 days a week. Now, what I would do is I would, for example, block off an entire Saturday to try something new. And I would do that a couple of Saturdays in a row to learn something new. Or I would have people ask me for a specific tutorial so I could, dig into that and learn some new stuff, right? So I see that Niels has joined. Yeah, so how's my hand? Well, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but I got something going on with my hand here, and I don't know if you can see the difference. But what basically was the case is I thought I had some kind of carpal tunnel, RSI, something going on with my hand. Turned out that's not the case at all. I was actually bitten by some sort of insect or whatever, and my hand was so swollen that I couldn't use my hand for days. But it's kind of okay now. I just recorded my first video, tomorrow's time lapse. That was kind of okay. So yeah, thanks for asking. So Steven is saying, sounds like my life, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week in the gaming industry. Well, yeah, but the thing is, if I had to choose by doing this or go sit in some cubicle wearing a suit and tie and having a boss, I wouldn't even do that if they said you can do that 2 days a week and have the rest of the week off. I do this because I love to do this and I want to do this. And I cannot wait every day. I cannot wait to start up my PC, do some 3D stuff and learn some new things. And that's just the way it is. So Alan Cooper is saying hi. Hi, Alan. What's the best way to rig face and body at the same? So rigging the face and the body, I talked about that earlier. Face rigging is something you would typically do either by traditional rigs or by blend shapes. The body is typically joint rigs, okay? So Dreamboat is saying, is it good to use plugins in Maya? Well, yes and no. It's good to use plugins in Maya because it will give you a competitive edge. Problem is, though, if you do a project for a studio and you are working on their software and they don't have the same plugins, you don't want to handicap yourself because you don't know how to do things without it. So Stephen is saying, as lead programmer, I have to learn new things all the time, not just programming, but creating tools for our 3D artists. Well, I understand that, Stephen, but the question there is your employer allowing you to do that? I mean, if you're a working freelance and you have to basically struggle to get money in, it's kind of hard to find the time. Now, if you're working for a studio, it's in their interests that you build skills. So they would typically support you with that. And to your second comment, rigging face, you would use morph targets. Yes, that's a good possibility too. So bye, Nikolai. Have fun. So Ant is saying, I sometimes get stuck. Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's like anything in life. When you're learning, when you're in the process of learning something, you will run into issues that you don't know how to fix. That's what the whole learning process is about. And just keep on going, keep on pushing yourself, keep on practicing. And that line of where you get stuck will move for sure. So Stephen is saying that he just got bought out by Microsoft. That's pretty cool. Let's see. Mohammed is saying, I love animation and I want to do something like a short movie. And I know my an illustrator, but I feel I missed the basics of drawing. What things do you recommend to learn? Well, I'm actually going to be speaking at a number of international 3D events later this year and beginning of next year in Munich and in Edinburgh and in LA and New York. And they're basically all about that topic. The topic of, okay, so you have all these technical skills, you know, Maya, you know, Substance Painter, you know, Photoshop, you know, all these programs, right? How do you progress? How do you become better as a 3D artist? What do you need to learn? Well, keep in mind that everything we are doing is storytelling, right? You're telling a story, even by modeling a table, you're telling a story. Is it an old table? Is it a new table? Is it been outside? Whatever. You can influence that by changing texture, by adding grunge, dents, scratches, whatever. So what's important is to invest time in how to tell a story and what techniques you need to tell that story. So watch movies, read books, do whatever you need to do to get more creative. My personal thing is photography, because photography forces you to look at things in a specific way. You don't need very expensive cameras or whatever, even your phone's fine. But take pictures and read about composition, read about lighting, read about leading lines, read about any technique you can use to make a story more interesting, okay? So the Brawler is saying, did I make Hellblade? No, I have not. But if you want me to do so, send me an email. Okay, so thank you, Dennis. Dennis is saying, I suck at UV mapping and texturing. Wish there were more tutorials. I actually did something like 35 videos on UV mapping and texturing. I would say that UV mapping is something that it needs to click in your head, if you know what I mean. You need to understand what UV mapping is. And the way I like to explain this is, let's say you have a roll of wrapping paper and you have a round soccer ball, okay? Now, if you were to wrap that paper around that ball, it would look horrible, right? Because you got a round 3D ball and you got a flat surface of paper. Now, UV mapping is basically cutting that paper in sections that will allow you to wrap the ball properly. That's what UV mapping is. So if you have to UV model, or UV, let's say a table, you break it down into basic shapes. So the top of the table is, let's say, a flat cube. The legs are extruded cubes and so forth, okay? So Stephen is saying it's always good to adjust your portfolio to meet the requirements of the company you're applying for a job. I completely agree. And again, you know, he said, but that depends on whether you're freelance or not. I agree there too. I only work freelance, or 99%. Sometimes I work freelance on projects for studios, but still freelance. And then you kind of need to keep in mind that you have all sorts of clients that you want to attract. So Dennis, yeah, my hand is doing somewhat okay. 2 days ago, I couldn't move my fingers. Right now, it seems to be okay. So, and you know, being a 3D artist, it's a big deal if you can't use your hand, right? So Ganesh is saying, I also like photography, like I said earlier. Okay, so I have, for those of you who don't know this, I have a second Maya, or second MS Tutorials channel, MS Tutorials 2. It's all about photography. Now, I have been talking about this for a lot. I've been talking about this a lot. People in the 3D community apparently are not that interested in it, right? So I haven't been creating a lot of tutorials for that channel, but if I get specific questions from people that want me to do that, I will, okay? So Mohammed is asking whether this video will be uploaded after I finish. Yes, it will. It's going to be online, okay? So what else, guys? I'm just looking outside for a second here because it's been extremely hot here for more than a month. And now it started to rain and it's lightning outside. And the lightning is so hard and the thunder is so hard that my windows are, you know, vibrating. So the Brawler is saying, what games inspire you the most? The art, the environment, and the assets. Well, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, well, I'm not embarrassed to say, but I'm not really a huge game fan. I'm more a movie guy, right? So I don't play games a lot myself, you know, besides the obvious ones back in the day. But that said, I'm not really into gaming. That's why I do hardly no tutorials on Unreal or whatnot. I'm much more into movies. So Stephen, it's interesting, Stephen, that you are working as a professional in a studio and you understand the importance of photography. That is so cool. I keep on talking about that all the time. If you understand the basics of photography, then you will understand composition. You will understand how to frame a scene properly, camera position, the angle. All of that is so important for your storytelling. So I can't emphasize that enough. So Chaos is saying, do I need a master degree for being an animator? No, not at all. You just need to be really good at animating. I mean, does it help? Of course. I mean, if you have the opportunity and if you can afford it, I would certainly do that because it's a huge leg up. But if you can't, it doesn't mean that people won't hire you. Just make sure you're good. So Barun is saying, if cost wasn't a factor, what camera would you like to own? Well, the thing here is photography is done by people, not by cameras. I know there are a lot of people out there that are real gearheads and they want to own everything. Of course, gear has some impact on the output, but for the most part, it's really about the photographer, right? Now, the main distinction I would say is the sensor size. So do you have an APS-C or a full size sensor in the camera? Now, the price difference there is a cropped sensor in a camera is maybe $800–900, where a full frame camera starts at, I would say, $3,000 and goes way up to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, or way more than that. I personally think that's a bit ridiculous. I'm totally happy with the crop center. I've been working with that for years. And for my 3D art, you know, whether I take pictures with my phone or with my camera, it doesn't really matter. So Ant is saying, I'd love to do a portfolio, but I don't really find inspiration. Well, the thing is, you can model anything at all. Now, the inspiration for me is not always in the object itself, because let's say I see, I don't know, I mean, I see this coffee mug here, right? Now, don't look at this as a coffee mug, because a coffee mug is boring. Look at this as a modeling challenge. I mean, what is difficult about this, right? The fact that you got this connection going on here, and how do you connect that to the main body, and will you get any issues here with UV distortion and whatnot? If you look at it from that point of view, suddenly it's a lot less boring. And then what you can do is you can try to model it in different ways, or try to speed model it, or try to UV it in a different way. Just challenge yourself to increase your knowledge. And if you find it difficult, then that's exactly the point. The whole point of this is to challenge yourself. So that's another good question here. How do you get realistic trees? Well, there's kind of the distinction here. When you're putting trees in a scene, is the scene going to be real-time rendering or not? Now, what do I mean by that? A movie, let's say an animation. Hang on, guys. I'm just going to ignore that. Ik zit live te streamen. Wil je zo drukken? Doei. Sorry, guys. So I completely lost my chain of thought. What was I talking about? Right, creating trees. So the thing is this: if you create a movie is rendered in sequence. So frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. And every frame is rendered once. Now, this can take a long time, but once the movie is rendered and it's done, you're done. However, if you're creating a tree, let's say for a game environment, you don't know in what order it's going to be rendered. Because if the main character in the game decides to turn left, the game has to render whatever is in screen, right? So in that scenario, you need low poly models, preferably with a normal map. So there's a big difference what you're going to use it for. So when there's a requirement to have a low poly model, what people typically will do is they will use alpha maps. So they basically got a square tile with a picture of a leaf on it, and they will put all of those on the tree. So it's kind of different depending on what you're using it for. And then, as Stephen mentioned, there are specific software packages out there that will help you to create grass, trees, scrubs, flowers, and so forth. Depending on how professional you get, how much money you have, the budget you have, for example, in a studio, you can go out there and buy some amazing software. So Mohammed is saying, what groups or web pages can I participate in? Well, how many of you are a member of my Hangout group on Facebook or on Google+? And what I'll do here, hang on. So this is a link to my Facebook group. I got 2,800 members, and they talk about art. They share their art. They help each other out, and it's really cool. So yeah, I suggest you join that. And I have a group on Google+ as well. So a lot of people join in there because they can just learn a lot of stuff from other people. Okay, I see we're pushing almost a full hour now. So I want to go for, let's say, another 5 minutes, and then I'm going to call it quits. So if you guys have any additional questions, let me know. In the meantime, I got a question here from Jordy saying, do I have to master most skills like modeling, rigging, animation, lighting, etc. in order to be a VFX or a visual effects artist? Well, the term VFX artist is very, very, very generic, right? It can mean anything. For example, I talk to people, they work for a company, they basically work on continuity issues. So let's say you got a main character in a real life movie and he is the so-called hero or main character, right? And he's supposed to wear a weapon on his hip during the entire movie. But he's a big star. He doesn't want to carry that heavy thing around. He's kind of annoyed. So he just takes it off and says, you know, add it later. So as a visual effects artist, you will actually have to go into, for example, Maya and the combination with After Effects, create a fake weapon and put that on the hip and make sure that weapon moves around with the character when the character is running around. So based on the project, based on whether it's real life footage or not, based on what type of work you're doing, there are 1,001 different explanations possible here. So RB Gaming is saying, is it okay to post work related to ZBrush in your Facebook group? Of course, anything 3D. The only rule that I have in my group, because this is literally called the MH Tutorials Hangout group, the only rule there is don't post 3D tutorial videos off of YouTube, because that's not what that group is for. And if you want to do that, there are a bunch of other groups you can do that, right? So here's a question about whether you can do a showreel with just one software. I mean, if you, for example, only know Maya, then it makes sense that you will make a portfolio with only work in Maya. I mean, what else are you going to do? Should you learn more than just Maya? Yes, of course. But for now, I mean, your portfolio is not your final portfolio. You will update it in 6 months, in a year and a half, in 2 years. So that never stops, right? So Ant is asking me a question that I really don't understand. Can I do a wheel with all the details of slot? And I'm not sure what you're saying there. So Mohammed is saying, should I care about the scene first and then creating characters? Well, I talked about this before. The thing is this, what you're doing is you're telling a story, right? Now, it all depends on, are you doing your, the chaos is going by chaos. Are you doing your personal project, doing everything yourself, or are you working in a team, right? I mean, everything starts with a story, and the story has to be told by props, by characters, by environments. So when it ties into that story, it's okay. So if this is your story and you are telling it, you can decide that yourself. If you're working for a studio, it kind of depends on what you decide on as a group, right? Okay, I'm going to do one more question, guys. So who has a question? And then we'll shut this down, and we're doing a full hour now, okay? So let's see. So give me one juicy question, guys. So I love this question. So Daniel Chuck is saying, most useful skill you learned to launch the beginning of your career. Most useful skill has nothing to do with 3D modeling. The most useful skill that helped me to get jobs as a 3D artist is the art of listening. Usually when you deal with customers, they have no idea what they want, right? I mean, of course, there are exceptions if you're working with professionals, but 9 out of 10 times, there are a lot of people that want something and they kind of don't really know exactly what they want. And you have to help them creatively to understand what they're saying and help them towards, you know, a model or whatever, okay? So listening and translating whatever the customer is saying into something that is a concept. So the client is saying, okay, I'm selling, I don't know, oranges, whatever, and I want to have a 3D scene with happy oranges. Well, what does a happy orange mean, right? You got oranges dancing around, whatever. And by talking to the customer and helping them to create a concise concept that you can actually go out and create, for me, that was most helpful. Because I did a seminar a while back, last year actually, at Animago in Germany, talking to 3D artists, a room full of 3D artists. They were very, very, very talented as 3D artists, a bunch of mad technical skills, but they couldn't land a job and they couldn't find paid jobs for the simple reason they had a hard time communicating with the customer. They didn't understand what the customer wanted. They didn't understand what they were saying. They got annoyed with the customer, and within no time, you have no customers at all, right? So that is that. Okay, guys, well, we hit 1 hour. I'm going to call it a day. Thank you guys so much. I thought it was really fun. If you guys thought it was fun too, please leave a comment underneath this video. I'm going to have this video on YouTube. Please leave a comment what topics you want me to talk about next time. Whether you enjoyed this or not, that would mean the world to me, okay? So that said, all of you guys, thank you so much for all your questions. You guys rock, and see you guys next time. Bye.